opinions, this is a great opportunity to share some of your thoughts and opinions and ideas about this subject. You have a lot of experience and knowledge. I love the wisdom of the crowd concept, which is, be able to share different ideas and then seeing what fits under certain circumstances. So do not hesitate. Do not hesitate to type your thoughts in chat. The other thing is I love taking questions throughout the session, not just waiting till the end. So I'll be watching chat throughout the presentation. You have a specific question or a specific comment that you want to make during the session, please do not hesitate to do that. If you have a dissenting thought, great. I just ask that you share it respectfully, and I will present that dissenting thought out to the group as well. And then we can continue that learning process. I mean, with presentations like this, you'll catch one or two things that really get you interested. You go forth and prosper, if you will, from that idea. Maybe go forth and research the idea some more. This is really information and knowledge sharing, which is critically important. But the key is, if there are some specific areas there that you want to tap into, you want to ask for a further explanation, please don't hesitate to ask questions in chat, and away we go. So we're going to talk about IoT, Internet of Things. We're going to talk about DX, digital transformation. Sometimes you'll see CX, and CX is customer experience. Sometimes you'll see UX. UX is user experience. The reality is that kind of user experience and customer experience world gets impacted from digital transformation. But we're in this case, DX is digital transformation. Give you a high level concept of the disruption. What's driving this disruption? We'll talk about where IoT DX is. The fun part is getting into that data side. DX, it's about data. IoT is about data. So what is this thing called data? What's the value of it? Then how is machine learning, artificial intelligence, and even deep learning, DL, allowing us to get more data? What does that mean? Is it really thinking, or is it not thinking, just processing? We'll talk about the impact on human capital. Then we'll discuss at the end learning. The idea that part of transformation is the ability to learn. And are you set up to learn appropriately to deal with this disruption, as well as dealing with the information that you're getting, or the information that you're going to have to learn to be prepared for this type of disruption? Any folks out there have any experience in DX right now? Anybody working with a chief digital officer? Anybody working on a DX related project or an IoT project? And just go ahead and chat that in, and I'll respond back if as I see stuff coming in. But what you want to think about with IoT and DX is it's impacting a lot of things. Sounds pretty nebulous, right? But it's been a huge impact on marketing. The world of marketing has really been blown up over the last 10, 15 years. And even with that, the world of sales. So how do people engage a customer? When do they engage a customer? When do they actually engage a salesperson? This has all changed. And with that, technology has had to has had to change and adjust to handle those things appropriately to allow companies to compete. All of you at some point will have some connection into a marketing automation related project. So we have some commentary here about the impact of digital transformation in marketing. The automobile industry is really going to be the place that IoT takes off. Real-time information into your car. Right now, you might use Waze, and Waze was bought by Google Maps, but incorporated, you'll get some heads up that there might be a speed trap coming up. Most of that is all of it is really people putting that information in and sharing it. There could be a time when there's real-time information associated with what the gas prices are based on the current gas stations around you, what gas station doesn't have a line, which gas station does have a line, real-time coupons that are coming and being presented to you, traffic congestion data. Certainly this is the world of NVIDIA. NVIDIA does a lot of chip design for the automotive industry. So there's a lot there. As it relates to manufacturing, you really see this transformation with GE, General Electric. moving to more of a software company instead of just a machine appliance manufacturing organization, self-healing machines that can communicate to different vendors at different levels, to different people who are working on those systems. The legal world has been significantly adjusted by IoT and data in regard to the way you gather information. How do you find precedent for your cases? The sales side is completely connected with the marketing side. The world of sales has changed dramatically with regard to how and when you engage somebody, and when somebody wants to be engaged by a company salesperson. And then the one wild area is the healthcare area. It used to be called digiceuticals. Now the common concept is digitherapeutics. A lot of my knowledge here was derived from my time working with a company called Revive. We had a wearable device for ADHD, focus and attention. And I still follow that company, still work closely with the CEO. So I am able to pass on the information and some of the strategic transformations we made there as part of this presentation. And the hope is that this all goes through the lens of project management. How does it affect you from managing projects? Remember that IoT cannot, and data and digital transformation can affect you as it relates to the project you're working on, but it also can impact you based on the tools that you are able to use to do your job better. So what is it? IoT. What I like to tell people is we have to remind ourselves that our ears don't really hear and our eyes don't really see. Our eyes take light waves, our retina processes those into electrical waves, and then our brain registers and reads what those waves are based on the brain's interpretation. Ears process, sound waves. Sound waves then get converted to electrical impulses, and then your brain interprets those sounds. IoT is like that. IoT starts with sensors. Sensors put in areas that might have been difficult to put in before. And these sensors are able to gather information, aka data, and then have that data stored or have that data used in the processing of fill in the blank. The reality is, as we talk about, and we'll continue to talk about in this presentation, what are you using it for? We can actually collect data in some of the craziest places now, but is that data valuable? Is that data useful? That's part of the concept, but basically at its heart and soul is that IoT means that everything has or could have a digital footprint. Your refrigerator, your car, your moped, if you have a moped, any physical device could have a sensing component associated with it gathering data. Big thing of this is the Ring cameras that are hot now. You used to be a doorbell. Now the doorbell is a Ring doorbell. That doorbell collects data at the point of entry at your house. And then the security systems that wrap around that. That's IoT, putting data collection at points that we could not put data collection before. As it relates to a vending machine, reporting back on what its utilization is at certain time frames and when it should be filled up. And what we want to think about with IoT is that it's not so much on that we can collect, but what are we collecting? Again, I talked about this in the last slide. What are you collecting? And then not only what are you collecting, but also what are you doing with it when you collect it? Manufacturing floors, you're going to be able to collect a lot of information as it relates to the function of the systems that are in operation. What is valuable, what isn't valuable? When you start getting into machine learning, you can start looking at data collection, communication at the elevator level to decide, the elevator itself can decide when it needs maintenance based on predetermined data collection and then send requests out for maintenance. These are part of the concept of the smart machine. So you're going to have this idea of data, but then we're going to talk about how that data is processed. So IoT, Internet of Things, where you can collect data. Why should you be collecting data at those points? So, some of the things that has made this happen is the fact that this is an ecosystem. I have a phone here. Basically, you see my phone, right? This phone is a computer. This phone processor storage is better than anything I had in the late 90s, early 2000s. We would be mesmerized by what we hold in our hand now if we saw this when we were there. Systems have had to change. Processors have had to change. Heating and cooling of processor systems have had to change. Now security has to change and adjust. So when we look at IoT, and specifically as we start getting into this concept of digital transformation, we got to look at it as it relates to an ecosystem. This is not a buy Cisco, put Cisco in, and magically IoT happens. You have to look at what processors you're dealing with. You have to look at the storage of the information. You have to look at the security of the data that you're putting into the systems. You have to look at your data management. You have to look at your data analysis capabilities. You have to look at this whole piece of things. You can see all the places you can go: smart cities, smart buildings, smart energy. But each one of those, you'll see in an upcoming slide, you're going through the entire iOS model. And for those of you that don't remember that, it's layer 1 through layer 7. It relates from the physical layer all the way up to the presentation layer of how data processes through. And we have local area networks, which is all of that's really happening at that within the building. You have wide area networks, which there is some, there are some distances that's allowing you to connect into things. But when you look at the Internet of Things, it's all of that. It's layer 1, where you're pulling your data from, how how the data is getting to you, wireless, cellular, physical line, the routing of that is routing supported by better bandwidth controls. That's the same thing that you had with voice over IP back in the day as well. And then going all the way up to what software is pulling that information in, then how am I presenting that information to the marketplace, all the way up to the presentation layer. So this is truly a complete ecosystem play, not just the stovepipe play, which makes it difficult when you're looking at trying to run a project in the IoT space, because it's going to touch a lot of different elements. That's why when we really get into IT, what we want to say is this is more strategic than it is technical. It's more of an adaptive problem than it is a technical challenge, because what we're looking at here is that digital transformation changes your business model, how you actually go to market. Remember, business models are internal as well as external. If you operate in a PMO, your PMO has a go-to-market or business model as it relates to how you engage the community of your customers. That business model can adjust and change based on how digital transformation is empowering the ability to provide information and then predictive analysis associated with the information. So products are changing, businesses are changing and basically disrupting. And this is part of the fuel of the Fortune 500 disruptors, where the S&P 500 now is poised to see basically a company existing there for 12 years on average, where in the 1960s that was almost 40 years on average. This is the technology that drives that. When we start looking at companies, the big one that you could do a picture of is Netflix. From CDs up to streaming, from streaming to content, all of that tied to digital disruption, all of that tied to what you can or can't provide. Now, the real problem they're faced with is how to deal with the idea of the revenue side of this digital disruption. Do you, as they're trying to do, offer commercials going back to what it was in the 2000s? Or do you offer more and more programming to satiate the appetite of us and deal with all the competitors around them? I really don't know what the answer is, but this is the thing we have to be thinking about. We can look at it in recruiting, what LinkedIn and Zip and Indeed have done with recruiting, specifically around how you position yourself. You have to look at yourself and your resume as a piece of data. And that data is going to need to be tagged appropriately. And that data in that resume has to be written in such a way that you'll have a higher chance of being pulled from the bots that are searching and the search algorithms that are searching for specifics that these recruiters are looking for. The medicine side, significant. How can we utilize data and lots of data to potentially predict problems to try to stop it before it occurs, or to mimic situations? And then when behaviors are starting to tie to that mimic situation, providing some type of therapeutic at that point. The Apple Watch is a huge piece of that. The data that it's gathering and its ability to potentially create, a machine learning algorithm that can give a certain amount of O2 level and heart rate that would coincide with the potential for a heart attack in the future. These are the things that we have to be thinking about as we look at what we might be able to do with the systems and tools we have. And a digital disruption is, how do we drive money? So an Apple Watch, maybe we give the watch for free and we sell access to hospitals for these people who have these pre-signature situations going on. So how you sell, how you market, how you position. So as a project manager in this environment, you really have to be excited to thrive in this disruptive period. So I'm going to have a few slides about adaptive versus technical challenges, some concept around adaptive leadership. But to truly manage through this, you have to start pushing the status quo to the side. I'd like to say in a lot of cases is that the status quo is an invisible killer. If we let it go on too long, it's ultimately going to be what hangs us. The same concept can be regarding our experience. If we rely too much on our past experience and not building new experience, that could be a very fatal recipe for us, both as a product out in the marketplace and for our current company. We want to, in this situation, we're talking technology likes to talk about trees. Like I talk forest and trees, especially when I talk about systems thinking. System thinking is the forest. The trees are the pieces within that system. You really have to look at a systems mindset. You have to look at the forest, not the trees, not the specific elements of those trees, to have a full vision about what you can do. Ultimately, we're looking at why. IoT person must not think in terms of how, but an IoT person should be thinking in terms of why. Why? And you might get help from your distributors and your VARs as you like looking at the stacks that you want to bring in. But ultimately, it's not about the tech, it's about the why. And then you can figure out from there how to deploy that tech. So really what we want to look at is this concept of being adaptive. In a digital disruptive period of time, project managers have to start thinking in terms of being adaptive. That's being comfortable being uncomfortable. That's having a very, very strong sense of what is essential and what is expendable. And then as I talked about this idea of challenging the status quo based on the knowledge that you have of what's going on around you, what is potentially possible. So adaptive leadership is actually a thing that the PMI, Project Management Institute, is looking at as well. If you look at your PMBOK 7.0, you're going to start really seeing some conversation around adaptive. And the book that you can really dig into is called Practical Adaptive Leadership. And that's also a deeper presentation that can be had as well. So what we want to be thinking about is that we want to say to ourselves, IoT and DX is really an adaptive challenge, because we really don't know what it is we're trying to solve. So we have to learn and figure out what it is we're trying to solve. And then once we have an idea of what we're trying to solve, then we kind of have to learn to figure out how to solve that problem. Technical problems is, I know what the problem is. I know how to put the team together to make it happen. I manage that project and we're done. Adaptive is, okay, how can we test? This is where the world of design thinking comes in, or the world of service design, whether those, or world of lean startup, what are some of those techniques we can use to test? How can we engage customer experience and gain information from the customer experience of some of these tests that we have, and the user experience of some of these tests that we have? Then as we start figuring those things out, how can we use a method like Agile project management, to be able to iterate in our development cycles so that we can adjust and change even as we continue to learn about what that problem is. And a great example of this is Revive. So Revive started out, the company I work for, was a wearable device. We built our own watch. The watch had vibrating technology in it that ultimately Rich Brancaccio, the CEO, got a couple patents for. And it would vibrate at preset times, and the wearer was supposed to engage that vibration and determine whether they were focused or not. So vibration caused them to think about where they were at in the status quo, were they focused or not, keep focusing. Vibration, keep focusing. And you can elongate the vibrations or shorten the vibrations based on someone's current focus. Now, this device also had an accelerometer in it, so it could judge movement. It could do steps. Then you start to be able to correlate the data. The problem is, for an adaptive challenge, is how do you sell this? Do you sell it as a wearable device? So you charge for the use of the hardware? Do you get rid of the hardware, put the software you have into other devices and sell the data access or sell the app? Do you sell the data itself, the data that you collect, and you sell that to different life science organizations as it relates to them helping to generate new regular therapeutics? Or as what Revive is doing now, because of what they were finding in each one of the tests that they were going through and trying to figure out the marketplaces, this is where they're going to that concept of the digiceutical. And now they're looking at it from, can we be a therapeutic device? A therapeutic device that could also be a diagnostic against other therapeutic devices. But that's an adaptive challenge. They did this through marketing, positioning the product, working with customers, getting the customers' feedback, looking at trends in the marketplace, that test aspect. So, as you dig into these adaptive challenges, what you want to remember as you start thinking about IoT specifically is both your problem and your solution requires learning. And when that happens, this is why it's a team effort, not just an individual. When in the world of adaptive challenges, we have to bring a full team together. Like I talked about here, I'd love to get your thoughts and opinions about what I'm presenting. So again, any comments, any additional thoughts, any additional questions? You might be thinking you have a question that other people might not have. They probably have a question that others would love to ask, but they're not asking it. This type of complexity needs multiple people providing ideas and thoughts. It can't be just decided by one person. There's too much. There's too much to see. There's too much to learn that one person can't process all that information. And the reality is that's what we talk about with machine learning. Our human minds are great at creation, of looking at the why, but we're not good at holding large streams of data. We're not good at holding detailed, complex elements of things in memory. That's why a lot of times people in law enforcement joke about eyewitness testimony being so weak. It's not because we have weak minds. It's because our brains are set for creating, problem solving, quick analysis, and then physical attack on that analysis. So we really have to say to ourselves, can we understand these adaptive challenges? So IoT, again, is one of those adaptive challenges. An easier one to kind of process for you, and I make this example all the time, is the idea of weight loss. I probably can see I'm kind of a bigger guy. well, I'm a big guy. I have lost and gained a lot of weight. So at one point when I was 32, 33, I'm 53 now. I weighed 175 pounds. So you can see I'm not 175 pounds now. So I probably, lost 400 pounds and gained 470 pounds since then, maybe even more, 480 pounds, maybe more than that. So when that happens, you can start seeing that this might be an adaptive challenge. So I have to learn first, why is it? Then I have to learn second, what should I do? And then when you get into this, what you start seeing is that there are mindset issues associated with adaptive challenges. There's belief issues associated with adaptive challenges. Remember, when you're looking at the Netflix example, how many people there would probably say, let's keep doing the CDs? What? No, we got to do the CDs better. We have to do the CDs better. Look at, man, Netflix, you have to go to a store. Hey, we can just send something in the mail. Mail is always going to be there. It's going to be inexpensive. Let's not change. Let's not change. The streaming thing, the technology doesn't work. There's not enough bandwidth going to everybody's houses. You can see how it's very easy to fall into, let's optimize today because I can understand it, instead of trying to figure out what we can do now that will fill in for tomorrow. So when you look at the state of IoT, now going back to this, we have to start thinking in terms of what are all the pieces. We talked about pieces putting in the whole. So we have sensors, we have machine learning, we have data, we have all these interesting parts and pieces that we have to learn about, and we have to be able to understand. And this is why we just can't say, well, IoT is NVIDIA, or we can't say IoT is GE, or we can't just say IoT is Cisco, or we can't say IoT is just Netflix. In order to get that great service you get from Netflix, there has to be a whole system underneath that. The thing about IoT and Netflix, which is really interesting, much of their content creation centers around the data that they collect from us. So they collect data on our watching habits, when do we go back to watch a second part of a series or a third part of a series? When do we stop watching? And they even have, going back to the Malcolm Gladwell world, they even have a tipping point by which they know when a series, ultimately like 4 episodes will tell you if people are 4 episodes in, the tipping point usually is they'll either leave or they'll go. They'll leave or they go. So that 4, that 4 series tipping point. But it also ties back to some of the genres they go after. And just recently, you see a lot in Netflix, a lot of psychological thrillers. That seems to be a genre that they're really driving towards based on the data they collected. Before they collected a lot of data around just your typical drama, maybe a little over the top drama like the House of Cards. House of Cards was really their first big bets on their own content, and it tied a lot to the data they collected. So it was almost a self-fulfilled prophecy of success based on the information that they had available to them. In a lot of cases now, the Netflix scenario is more a competition issue than it is a technology issue or a data collection issue. There's just too many options, and too many price scenarios, and such that it just splinters the marketplace. So in that splinter marketplace, because of digital transformation, they have to continue to look at how do they produce revenue and get a competitive advantage on top of the others that are in that marketplace. So I love this picture because it really gives you the 7-layer model picture I was talking about. You have the component, the device level, then the edge. The edge would be like a local area network. The component would be the sensor itself. The device is the processing tool that the connector's data goes to. The edge is where you're going to start trying to get it out to the cloud, then your connectivity. Think about, IoT would not work if we did not have the type of internet infrastructure we have now, because it would just be too much data for the infrastructure. The fiber infrastructure we have put in place, the 5G cellular data infrastructure that we have put in place really ultimately enables this. So when you're making the IoT decision, you have to look at that. If you have a manufacturing plant in a certain place and you do not have the services necessary to carry that data, then IoT at that place might not be able to happen without looking at that connection level. Then the platform is where you're going to start putting this information into, how you're managing the totality of your IoT solution and how you're protecting it. And then really the most exciting part for me is when you start getting into the idea of insights and analytics. This is the world of NoSQL databases. This is the world of tools that can interpret this data. You see a lot of people working with Excel's tool. So not Excel's tool, but Microsoft's tool. I mean, just can't get off the top of my head. Hopefully somebody could get it for me. Microsoft's data tool, data mining tool. Oh, it'll hit me at some point. Power BI. Thank you, Dave. You're the man. Thank you so much. So Power BI and that genre of other data analytics tools, SaaS. SaaS is a big player in this space as well. And then ultimately, what are we going to provide users because of that information? So you get to the insights and analytics, and finally the services. So you can't just say, hey, we're going to do this. You have to say, let's look at doing that against the entire stack. And then across that entire stack is your security and your management. This is a great slide to take back. You can kind of see it in full light, all the different technologies, all the different tools, all the different challenges within some of these technologies. Now, the big thing for me, I still go back and I'm still mesmerized at that component level. I'm still mesmerized about the power that we're able to put in these small devices. And it's not even so much the processor. What really freaks me out is the heat control. So the things don't melt in your hand. Another thing I think is really powerful now is the WAN connectivity at the cellular 5G level. As I was talking about, as it relates to some of you maybe planning IoT at the manufacturing level, it's tough because some of the bandwidth technologies aren't there, and satellite still isn't there from a true power standpoint, although Starlink is pretty good. The 5G cellular connectivity technology is a significant game changer as it relates to IoT and pulling data from very, very hard to get to places. This whole thing, you can talk about the challenges you have from tracking ships and tracking storage containers on ships. So this is the slide. I can do the whole presentation just on this slide alone. When you look at digital transformation, what you have to look at is you have your external side. So that's your customer experience side. Then you have your middle, which is your internal side, the delivery. And then you have your your internal marketing and sales and product. So the customer experience side, how are you going to deliver this service to someone? How are they going to get it? Do you understand how they want to get it? What are the touch points by which they're going to see and be able to touch that which is being offered by your company? Am I going to pay for it from a hardware perspective, from an app perspective, from a accessing the data perspective, from a commercial perspective, as in commercials, as in advertisers? So that customer experience level is really important. Internally, you have to look at, how do your internal clients want to receive that information? Financial people love this. Non-financial leaders like to receive dashboards of data. How can you put those dashboards up? And then, they want the dashboard on the phone, but then, they're not going to read it, because I can tell you from my experience, trying to read a dashboard on a phone is an annoying situation. Nobody is reading those dashboards on their phones. So whether it's internal or external, digital transformation is affecting customers and how customers want to experience, what they expect to experience from you, both internally and externally. Remember, your internal customers are most of your internal customers in complicated white collar businesses are using a lot of technology, using app technology, using phone technology, using tablet technology. using, a lot of cases, complex wireless cellular technology to get things done. So they're going to have certain expectations as it relates to when they walk into the world, because they're doing some of these things as it relates to how they're running their households. This is especially true from a millennial standpoint. So that side, that customer experience side, is both internal customers as well as external customers. For me, this customer experience really resides in the future state analysis, future state design. It also ties a lot into marketing, and how do you market and you connect people, and also how do you position what it is you're building? How do people interact? And the marketing people go, how do they interact with your brand? But that is an important aspect. Now, the operational processes, this is where you can update and augment your PMO as it relates to predictive data around scheduling patterns, or predictive data around, the velocity associated with certain team operation, to be able to use that data to move teams around based on their productivity or their velocity. That this is getting into that whole performance management side. So really, from the operational process perspective at the PMO level, it's now being able to dig down and really see the truth behind the operation of your teams. Now, the thing is that we don't wear devices on us we don't have cameras on our head to watch how we're working. So you're not going to get that detailed work process. A lot of this has to be self-inputted information. So there's going to be a level of inaccuracy. The closer you can get to an actual digital device collecting that data, the less inaccuracy as it relates to the gathering of that data. The more input that somebody has to put into the system, then there's definitely increases for inaccuracies. Then the business model, talked about a lot here already. Which way you're going to go to market with it, how are you going to communicate it, how are you going to distribute it. So that business model then, of course, is going to feed your customer experience and feed your operational processes. But a lot of times we don't think about that business model. You might have a business model of deploying project managers at the team level. Okay, you deploy project managers at the team level. That decentralized model can sometimes lead to maybe a disconnect between the project manager and the PMO. The project manager may become more connected with the department or the division than the PMO. So how can you utilize digital technologies to allow for that connection to occur, to lock down to lock down templates or tools necessary so that there is more connection to the organization, to the centralized PMO, but you're still allowing for that flexible model of being in the business and learning so much about what's going on in the business. So as you can see, I could spend a lot of time on this slide. And as you're thinking about your digital transformation projects, putting them up against that slide is really valuable. But as I have said, and as I will continue to repeat, the true IoT story is data. Your data should provide insights, and your insights should provide decisions, especially on the operating side of things. Also on the marketing side of things. Why are you collecting that data? What is it that you want to learn from that data? And then the decisions you're making associated with that data. The best example here of a data story is the book Moneyball. I don't care, it's a baseball book, and we shouldn't be talking about sports analogies here, and it's really not a sports book. It is a sports book, but it's not a sports book. That book is about how poor data collection led to failures in decision-making and a complete waste of money in spending for players or resources. I know people aren't resources that truly were not going to deliver. So they were able to look at that sport, AKA that business, under a different lens based on data being collected And the best thing about baseball is there's just a ton of data. And that ton of data can then be inputted into systems, and then you gain insights. The biggest insight associated with baseball is the idea of walking value. I mean, in baseball, that does not value walking at all. It was considered nothing. It was considered not even that bad. But the reality of a walk and from a true value of baseball is significant. On base, it leads to extra scoring. So you make decisions associated with that. And again, I hate the analogy, but I got to continue through it. The decision was for the team that was presented in Moneyball was to be able to find less expensive, high quality talent in places that folks didn't see because they weren't looking through the right lens. So the entire IoT story is data. So what are you doing with your data outputs? How are you storing those data outputs? And then how can you connect disparate pieces of data? There is no transactional limits to data. It just keeps adding and adding and adding. The other thing about it is that it has this networking effect. You can use it in so many different places. It's just not one place. And then it increases in value, not decreases in value when you add it to something like most acquisitions, 1 + 1 = 1.5 with all the confusion, the layoffs. With data, you combine it, you can bring so much more power and relevance to the situation. This is what makes data so special. On top of that, when you can collect it without filters or without biases, then it truly can become powerful. And I love when people connect disparate points of data together, your multi-regression analysis, the mashups that are out there in the world that can overlay, crime data with population data, with job reporting data to look at cities from multiple different perspectives when you're making decisions about moving. So many different options. And then how valuable this can be, it all relates to, can you convert adaptive challenges because you don't know into technical challenges because the data, you have a way of processing that data so you can actually see through the fog. So you don't have to learn. That's one of the things I love about IoT and digital transformation is right now we have so many very difficult adaptive challenges around us. So we have to constantly learn, but collecting data in the right way, in the right places, putting multiple pieces of data together can help us see through that fog and turn what was used to be an adaptive problem into maybe a complex problem where I know the problem, but now I have to learn how to solve it, which is much better than I don't know the problem and I don't know the solution. Like my weight loss, I really don't know what the problem is. And when I dig into it, it's about my mindset. My mindset is I'd rather be fat and happy than skinny and neurotic. And so I have to break through that mindset. So if data is so special, then what is this whole AI thing? What's the issues? Well, when you look at AI, you have two things, data and computing power. And AI would include machine learning and deep learning as well. You have this data and computing power. And so what you're going to get is a bit of a virtuous circle, if you will. Sometimes we'll have a lot of data, but our computing power is off. Sometimes our computing power increased, but our ability to collect the right type of data is off. But you need both of these. And both of these require significant power. And this is where the quantum computing world comes to play as it relates to computing power and how much deep learning processing can happen. So AI, it mimics cognitive function. We are not living in a world where there is cognitive function in our systems. It mimics it. So with regard to my example of Revive, we use data from the accelerometer, working with Google TensorFlow, or TensorFlow, I can't remember, the learning tool. And we were able to teach the software what a fidget was. So part of an ADHD person's challenge is fidgeting. It could be a positive, it could be a negative, but you want to know when somebody fidgets. So if you have a certain point accelerometer, you can almost do a digital picture of somebody and their movements. So based on that, the accelerometer could see hand movements, leg movements, head movements, and then filming, not illegally, it sounds creepy, but filming kids in a classroom that's set up for this situation, and then teaching the system what a fidget is, they can start reading those fidgets. So what AI is doing, especially on machine learning, is that we're teaching a machine how to see things, in air quotes, see things, but they're not learning. It's the value is the amount of data it can process, and then the fidelity by which it can analyze that data based on learned interpretations. So the machine has to be taught right now. So again, we are wonderful at why. We are wonderful at creative interpretations. We are wonderful at problem solving. We are horrible when it comes to repetition, patterns, trends, predictions when dealing with a large scope of information. Our brains are not set for that. So what you have, AI and machine learning, augments our brain by providing this information and predictive patterns that it can show you, but we still have to interpret the why. Now, some of this might get into supervised versus unsupervised machine learning. At this point, the way machine learning operates, you need to have a human check-in to make sure that there wasn't a fly in the ointment. And there were some pretty bad stories about unchecked machine learning and what transpired because of it. But right now, we think deeply. We think deeply with little data, with a little bit of data, but a ton of context and subtext. Machines process deeply, a ton of data, patterns. They don't have context or subtext. They have predictions based on learned patterns. And what you're really going to get into is this idea of, can we move into the deep learning side more than just the machine learning side? And I'll talk about that in just a second, but really for most parts, when you hear someone say they have an AI system, they either have a predictive analytics system or they have a very strong learning algorithm, feature development that is predicting, is providing output based on what has been taught. Deep learning is less teaching, more multiple computers processing, that getting closer to this idea of some level of cognition. So it learns. You don't have to program it to constantly adjust. It learns. It learns and adjusts the algorithms, but based on what it's taught. Based on what it's taught. So in machine learning, there's a lot of feature development. Tell, more, tell, rethink, tell, more, less processing. When you're getting into deep learning, sometimes they start talking about neural networks. You know, sounds like, you know, the whole Terminator thing, but neural networks. So there's a lot more model development and system processing and less teaching. But all this wraps around the idea of speed, data and speed, processor speed. And we are nowhere near the processing speed to get to the levels of deep learning that could become, pretty cool. in some respects. So the statistics for you to start saying, oh, wow, this could really be something is around amount of money, market cap, opportunity in this market, where things are moving to, ideas of where folks are adopting IoT. And as I talked about the trends I see it very strongly in the manufacturing space, which has already been automated significantly with robot technology and machine technology, now adding to the ability of those machines to self-heal, self-correct, self-adjust, given a bunch of different inputs. I do think the car side of things with IoT can be extremely powerful, but the number one industry that has just exploded based on IoT data collection is marketing. The world of marketing is just grown by a factor you wouldn't believe, to the point where the marketing side of a business, MarTech, the CMO side of the world actually spends more on IT and IT related spending than the CIO does, because of how critical it is to understand digital transformation in the marketing space. They are much further ahead because it's the creation of revenue. And as I was talking about, you basically reach this virtuous cycle, if you will. Sometimes we need technology applications, processing. Sometimes we need infrastructure. Sometimes we need applications and processing. Sometimes we need infrastructure. Right now, we're more on the side of the processing at the computer level. So what will the next phase look like for what you would say Internet 3.0? What might be that next big thing? I think, the quantum computing thing could be very significant for what we can do, but then how are we going to be able to showcase that information? But certainly we're really at a stage where companies are trying to utilize machine learning and some deep learning to understand their customers better, especially externally, and doing so using non-SQL databases, using big data resources, and then using cloud provisioning, because you can hold so much in the cloud. That's why for a lot of project managers out there, you're going to be dealing with a lot of cloud-based projects, because that's where you can store a lot of this information cheaply. I mean, it's amazing what you can store on a Google or Amazon stack these days. So basically, you really see it. The stand is the processors, but it's really us. The whole concept of digital transformation revolves around what we can actually do with it, what we want, and what we can do with it. And right now, the biggest explosion outside of cloud engineers on the IT side is the data scientists, data engineers, data analysis, as well as business analysis, with regard to how to define future state systems. I didn't even get into what you could do with HR systems and data, especially around LinkedIn. Oh my gosh, there's so much untapped potential with HR recruiting and the LinkedIn side of things. It's pretty amazing. So with all that said, you realize that now within 5 to 7 years, over 50% of what doctors know will change, be added. 5 years. I have to completely relearn that which they had learned just 5 years ago. So where does that old knowledge go? How many times are you being driven by your experience when you should be looking at maybe being driven by what you're learning? And this is a concept of unlearning. I talked about the essential versus the expendable. And also, how do you get yourself to start thinking about getting rid of that experience which no longer provides you value? And on top of DX, you have to look at your adaptive learning, which is how can you stay distressed, but productively distressed as part of your learning process. And this is where leadership cultures have to get to. leadership cultures have to get to the allowed psychological safety of fail and adapt, not just saying it, but allowing for it so folks can feel safe even when they're uncomfortable, even when they're stretching themselves. Because too many of us are in the hot zone, which is you add one more piece of information to us or ask us for one more thing, we're going to blow up. Or, hey, I'm just going to sit here and do whatever I'm told to do. And then you lose the productivity. The one is the red zone, the other is the yellow zone. You can look at these slides, some tactics on how to keep the heat in the system, but it's all about the heat in the system is about dissenting voices, new interesting ideas and thoughts, different perspectives, which, you know, when you're stressed in the red zone, you want nothing to deal with, but that's really how you learn. Or if you want to decrease the heat, it's about getting back to what you know how to do, technical. Too many times we focus on learning how to do what we're doing right now better, instead of looking at what we should be doing in order to grow and be safer. With that, I'll stop my share. Questions, comments? I didn't get any during the presentation itself, but you know, it is what it is. Any thoughts, comments before I pass it on and before I let you go to the rest of your day? You can open up your mic too if you want.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. I steal the sharing now with the claim code. And while we're looking for any question, this is the claim code. We're gonna email it for participants. Sorry. Yeah, this is the claim code. I'll leave it a bit there, and just a reminder while we're waiting, we have a website, Northeast Ohio chapter website, PMI Northeast Ohio website. You can visit the website. There is an events calendar where you can see the chapter events, the coming events. We have a coming events in November 1, know the chapter, and we have an IBM day will come in 3rd November, and more are coming in. Like you can see the calendar and also follow us in the social media for any updates.
Get some good comments. This is great. I appreciate that. Malcolm Gladwell. Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, Malcolm, one of the best books of Malcolm, Stacy, is also David and Goliath. Because one of the things we do, once we get this data, the problem we have is we have preset filters that sometimes screws us up and be able to look at the data appropriately. That's the human condition is beautiful, but it's also complex. I mean, we have such a great ability to think and create. Yeah, Julie, the weight loss analogy is a really tough, that's an adaptive problem. We have such a great ability to think and create, but we also get stuck in the preset heuristic patterns. And we have to force ourselves out of that. That's why the idea of creating heat and learning ties to adding dissenting voices so you can block yourselves from getting out of predictive, pure preset heuristic patterns so you can actually make better decisions with the data coming to you. Julie, another one I use for adaptive leadership is working from home. Before COVID, it was an adaptive problem. During COVID, it was a technical problem. Now we're realizing we didn't solve the adaptive nature of working from home, and it's become an adaptive problem again. Any comments or thoughts or questions?
David, I thought that was a really good presentation. It gave me a lot to think about.
Thanks, Paul.
One of the comments is that it reminds me of it's not a completely new problem because we used to have this with control systems in manufacturing areas. You could have a temperature sensor that's continuously feeding data, but capturing temperature 10,000 times per minute doesn't do you a whole lot of good.
Yeah,
bring it once every 5 seconds might be valuable.
Mm-hmm.
And I could see that you just need to get started, and then as you as you learn more about what the offering is, that comes out of it,
Yeah, exactly.
you just
That's
need to go back in there and potentially tweak it.
precisely. I get frustrated. People just say, we're going to do this. Well, okay, you can do anything, especially in IoT now. You can do anything. But why? And then what's the cost benefit analysis associated with that? And so, Paul, great point. Thank you for sharing that. Any other thoughts or comments? Well, I hope you have me back. This has been a pleasure. Really, really enjoyed participating with the group. Thank you. I gave you my LinkedIn, so feel free to link in with me as well. We do a lot of other sessions out there besides stuff like this, so don't hesitate to join up on my LinkedIn page.
Thank you, David, and definitely we'll have you